Um, so I stopped a little bit earlier here because this is what happens when you lecture in front of an ocean all the time, especially when it's like whale season. All right, the dolphin might turn up, but I'll just do a bit of a coastal thing. So I stopped here because I remember this was here before, but there's a few new things. So anybody see any evidence of something going on here in terms of coastal erosion and risk? Trees are falling into the onto the beach. So this is generally, there's another thing that you might notice on some of those trees that suggests it's actually relatively recent. So look at the trees in the middle of the beach and what's on them. Yeah, so they have green leaves on them. So there was a time when me and Dylan went out to Flinders. We can show you where this is as well, where there's a crap picture of me next to a tree, which is a tree literally rolling around in the surf zone with all of its leaves on. So the erosion's been so quick that whole tree has just fallen straight into the ocean and is transporting around due to longshore drift. So out here, obviously, relatively recently, there's been substantial erosion that's knocked these trees off, probably similar to the kinds of, they're probably paper barks, some of them. The kind of trees that we see along out here this is the campground right here. So that erosion has been relatively recent. There's actually quite a nice embayment in here. There is no seawall yet. There is some sandbags though, which is there's a bit of, this actually groin here kind of goes into kind of like a seawall, and some sandbags in over there, trying to stop the erosion going back even further. I haven't put a seawall in place. One thing I'd say though, when we turned up here, is it looks nicer to go for a swim. So that's one of the things that can happen with a seawall when erosion is occurring. So you see the difference between where we're standing here and where we were over there, where you had a seawall basically and then no beach. So if erosion is really, really active and you chuck a seawall in, that is sometimes the eventual outcome. So here, for example, if we put the seawall in where those trees are currently sitting, you can imagine that would look very similar to what we have on the other side where we were just standing. They're obviously trying not to do that because this is people live in here permanently, but it's also a tourist location. It's much nicer to have a beach where you can just go for a lovely swim with dolphins. So you don't necessarily want the seawall here. So that's what these groins are trying to do to manage and keep the sediment here. Now our final stop is going to be just on that last groin, which is where I wanted to get to. And to give you an idea of what it used to look like in 2008, we'd actually walked across a sand spit that used to be down there. That you then walked across into mangroves. And so what I want to see is that was quite a long hundreds of meters sand spit is where that's gone, if it's still there. And these groins have probably been in for a little bit before 2008, some of them. I might be off with a bit of the timing there, but if I'm off, it's not off by huge amounts. So we'll just look down there and see what's now happening with the coast down there. And that'll be our last stop for this location. Okay. Anybody want to say anything or ask any questions? Oh, the question about the sand. Sorry, yeah. I don't 100% know the answer, but I'm going to say this relatively with authority, and we'll see how it goes. So the sand over in the beach over there seemed to be a bit more orange compared to the sand you might see in other locations. Now, I don't 100% know exactly what the sand looks like underneath these beaches here. But as a general rule of thumb, and Michelle, feel free to tell me something different, or Dylan, when you get the more orange sand or darker coloured, it tends to have more minerals within it. And it hasn't had as long out under fresh water, also humic acids that come from leaves, to leach the colour of that sand. So a lot of the white sand beaches that you end up on is often sand that is old, but it's also been out in the actual environment for a while, not in the marine environment, but out actually in the dune systems. You've had rain and fresh water on it, which is slightly more acidic, that then leaches the minerals out of that sand. So I would assume that the sand that's turned up on the beach over there is sand that's only relatively, in comparison to other locations, been recently taken out of the dune systems and hasn't been sitting on the surface of the dune systems for as long so that it can get that colour leached out of it.
Yeah. That sand, so you also see it here, see the difference between this lovely white sand and this.
Yeah.
It's been brought in.
Okay, it's been brought in, this sand?
To fill it in, yeah.
Right, okay, so this is actual nourishment here, do you mean?
This sand here, and particularly that really red sand,
Yeah.
has been brought in
Oh,
to like boost, like to basically build it out.
so we've had nourishment as well
Yeah, when
from,
they put the groins in,
yeah,
they put extra sand in to
yeah.
push that erosion back out.
Great. I'll mention it for the tape. So Michelle was mentioning that some of the different types of sand as well is that there was more sand placed when the groins went in to help maintain the shoreline here and build it out a little bit. We remember the colour of the sand when we visit. We should visit on the schedule is Brown Lake tomorrow, and you can see what the colour of the sand looks like around that lake there, which is on the surface of the dunes, and you should see a really markable difference compared to the colour of the sand that you see here. Okay, let's go down to our final stop at the final groin down there and have a look at what the relic sand spit looks like now.